Welcome to the Rollwise Podcast, the weekly talk show that explores all things tabletop RPGs. I'm Mike, one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my fellow RPG enthusiasts, Brent and Jeff. Say hello, Brent.
Hello, everybody.
Say hello, Jeff.
Hi, everyone.
So grab your dice, settle in, and let's kick off this week's show. This week, we are going to apologize because last time we recorded the show, we had a pretty good discussion on the OneD&D playtest. That was about Paladins and Druids, and we got into some pretty meaty discussion there. And at the end of it, unfortunately, tech gremlins came and, well, I don't know. They did what they do to technology, so there is no last week's episode. But we are going to reminisce a little bit this week on what we had talked about, just so you guys can see a little bit into our brains. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about the news of the new Dungeons and Dragons movie. We're all very excited to see it over here, so we're going to share our enthusiasm with you, as well as some news that it might be premiering at South by Southwest, as in it is premiering at Southwest. We were not invited to the opening, so we'll just have to speculate on what people will think. And then last, we're going to wrap up our Vaesen game. It was a little longer running, but that's no big deal. It was actually quite a lot of fun. So we got a lot to talk about tonight, and so why don't we dive on into it, starting with the Dungeons and Dragons movie. So, Brent, Dungeons and Dragons movie. I hear Dungeons and Dragons movies are always your favorite. So why don't you tell us what do you think this new movie is going to be like? Do you think it's going to be good, or do you think it's just going to be Hollywood at its normal?
The word train wreck comes to mind. I can't even imagine that it's going to be. It might be entertaining, but I think it's going to be entertaining like The Room is entertaining, where it's like what human beings actually took the time to write this. And I'm further frustrated by finding out that there are people that like love the game and are familiar with the game who presented a script for a new movie and they looked at it and went, no, we want to do this other thing. And that, I think, irritates me a little.
Well, I could see that. I have to say that there's a lot of RPG enthusiasts, a lot of good storytellers out there. But for some reason, anytime a D&D movie comes up, they get a script, they put it together, and it turns out to be one of those D&D movies that you've seen in the past. And I think almost every one of them has been disappointing on nearly every level. Now, I don't have a good memory of all the D&D movies all over the years, because I think after the first D&D movie, I kind of swore off viewing any of the subsequent attempts by anybody to make a D&D-esque movie. But Jeff, what do you think? You have hope for this? Do you think?
It would be hard to find somebody who liked heist movies better than me. I have probably seen most of the heist movies that are out there multiple times. And I don't have a lot of hope for this. I mean, I don't want it to be bad. I certainly like a lot of the people involved in it and think they have a lot of talent. It never feels to me like Hollywood wants to capture the magic of a great gaming session, the shared storytelling experience that Brent has mentioned before, that you get when you gather around the table and everybody gets involved in what's going on. They just really want to bolt the IP onto an action movie, or in this case, a heist movie. And I don't know that taking the Dungeons and Dragons intellectual property will make a movie better unless you're making a Dungeons and Dragons movie. And Hollywood doesn't seem to get it. They do it with a lot of more niche things to try to broaden the market, right? I mean, these movies are expensive to make, and you need butts in the seats in the theaters. And I hope it is. I will be looking at Twitter later tonight if it's premiering at South by Southwest. I will be, or this weekend. I will certainly be checking Twitter, but man, if there's any hopes at all, it's for a meh. That feels like the high point to me, a 50-50 kind of thing.
Yeah, there's two things that I will say about that I think is always funny. One is that, like, there's plenty of stories out there that could be the D&D movie that no one ever decides to make a movie of. Like, Like, and as nerds, we've talked about this before, but like, you could take the Dragonlance movie and you could probably make a decent movie out of it, or the Durist books or any of those things, and you could like just make a script out of it and say, yeah, this is the D&D movie, and it would work. But that seems to not be what they want to do. They want to make a D&D movie, which is strange. The second thing I wanted to say is, it's a heist movie. Like, from the advertising, I had not picked up on that, but I guess you're right. It is a heist movie, but I had not picked up on that. Then again, I'm really irritated by the special effects I've seen on the Red Wizard of Thay that's in it, which is also strange that picked a Red Wizard of Thay to be in this movie that isn't in Faerun, which is also strange to me. But anyways, maybe it is in Faerun, which makes my heart even a little sadder. But yeah.
Well, so I guess here's a question for you. So if this is successful as a heist movie, do you think that automatically makes it a successful D&D movie?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So why? So if it's a successful heist movie, what could possibly make it a not successful D&D movie in that case?
If they can't make the D&D elements work, if all they do is feel like they're bolted on, just to be there, just so that we got this real bitchin' dragon that we CGI'd spraying acid all over I thought it looked okay. I have read people on the internet who freaking hated it. And there are people that know more about the lore and stuff than I do, but I thought some of it looked cool, but some of it, if everything's just a high spot, if all the D&D stuff is just a high spot, like in a wrestling match, right? It's a guy climbing to a ladder to deliver a drop kick down. And I don't know. I'm scared.
Well, that's the thing, right? Is like, it can't just be bolted on like, oh, it's just, yeah, it can't just be bolted on. It has to feel like a story that was made in the world that it's being told in. And it doesn't ever feel like they have a real identity for where the like D&D-ness is happening. And that's really the issue, is it just feels very, very plastic. Other than Jeremy Irons making gifable screams in the first movie.
Hey, well, and so I have to admit that when I heard that Jeremy Irons was in the first movie, like, I didn't even realize that was like a thing, but it was pretty amazing. But I guess, so here's a couple things that I read, because I saw an article from the Austin Chronicle that was talking about, kind of how it was premiering in South by Southwest, and South by Southwest is this kind of fun sounding thing, and they've got pop-up bars for, like D&D pop-up bar. That sounds like it could be a lot of fun. But they actually got some time to talk about with the two directors, which I believe it is John Francis Daly and Jonathan Goldstein. That's what they have written here. They're the directors, and it sounds like how they took to this movie was, it at least gives me a glimmer of hope. And the reason it is because they sat everybody down and made them play D&D. Just to see, like, they had some casting choices in mind as to who they thought they'd want to play certain parts. Like Hugh Grant, they wanted him to play the part that he was given, and they wanted Chris Pine to play the part that he was given, which to me, I was like, that's really interesting to have those character actors kind of in mind when you went into this story, just to kind of begin with. And then second, what they kind of mentioned is that they had mentioned that they, what they got them into the D&D roles and see kind of what they did as their characters to kind of know how they could riff this a little bit more into the story that they were telling. And so they're at least telling me, as creatives, they took an approach that I don't necessarily know what I would have, if I would have seen this, because I have heard other very beloved franchises where it's like I think, and I don't want to necessarily say it's bad by any actors or anything like that, but I did hear that there are some other franchises where the main lead basically was like, oh, I'm kind of coming into this role and it's kind of a continuing series, but I'm not going to read up on anything and I'm just going to like act how I see fit in this role. I think that was a Doctor Who phenomenon or something like that. And of course, once they started getting into on-site locations, they really wanted to use the green of Ireland. So it's going to be a very vibrant movie, I hope. That could be a lot of fun. But there was one thing that did worry me. So they actually got to this, and they mentioned, they specifically talked about how they departed in the terms of magic. And this is quoted, while spellcasting has become more common on screen in franchises big and small, Dungeons and Dragons draws unique inspiration from the magic of the game, combining physical components and verbal spellcasting to show a variety of magical effects on screen. That I didn't have a problem with. The next part though is where I start to go, okay. And so I quote, one of the things that John and I said was when we started to think about the look of this was that we did not want to have two people standing there with their hands out and rays coming out of their hands. End quote. I thought that was good. But then they talk about in the next sentence is that they said they wanted to avoid this. The film introduced mechanical components device for Justin Smith Simons the Sorcerer, blurring the lines between wizard and gunslinger. And I said, fuck me. So, I mean, the instant they said blur the lines between wizard and gunslinger, I was like, oh, Jesus. I mean, and there is a chance that it could be cool. I mean, I like gunslingers. I mean, I watched The Mandalorian. I'm kind of a little confused as to how this current season is going and what they're going to do with it. But I like the gunslinger-esque things. I'm not a Western lover, but I like the archetype of gunslinger. But when I saw those two things together, smashed into a horrible panini of whatever the fuck this is, I get a little worried.
Or a lot worried. Everybody wants to make their unique stamp on stuff. And I get you don't just want the dudes with the lightning coming out of their fingers, because frankly, we've seen it a million times. From every movie with a magic user to freaking Star Wars and Emperor Palpatine, right? It's slightly played out, and so everybody wants to put their own spin and their own twist on stuff, and sometimes it makes it better, sometimes it just makes it different and worse. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't foresee this being like impossible to imagine, because weirdly enough, a magic spell gunslinging person, I think that was like Final Fantasy VIII, where they had the gun swords. I don't know. Did you guys ever play that franchise? Do you remember that?
I did.
Yeah. So they were
weird
when
I first saw them.
They were silly and weird, and I didn't necessarily think that they were the most practical weapon, but it was different. I mean, Final Fantasy already had 7 games up to that point, plus some side games, and so why not do something entirely different?
Right. Why? I can see innovating a little bit, but like changing that sort of stuff is kind of what changes the source material and gets us back to that bolted on feeling. Like conjures for me like images of, well, what if Gandalf had a gun? Like what if he was pistoleroing the Balrog? Like it's just not what happens. So at some point it's like it's a questionable choice when you change how that stuff happens. Yes, Gandalf with a gun might be awesome. I got it, but still.
I really want to see Gandalf on the bridge, like John Rambo with the M60 and the belt of ammo and the other wrapped around the other arm, just peppering the Balrog. I don't know why. I hate that you put that into my head. I really do.
But when you add that line, "You shall not pass." I mean, come on. Like that would. That's a certain level of epic. I mean, I hate to say it, Brent. You're in the wrong here. We want to see Gandalf peppering a Balrog saying, "You shall not pass." 2-1, we win.
I see the scene from Predator where Billy Bear, the native guy in Predator, is like has his big knife standing on the thing, waiting for the Predator to come. That's the scene that comes to mind. Gandalf, swole, big knife.
Has to be
using Galadriel losing Galadriel to cut his chest, waiting for the Balrog.
You mean Glamdring?
Yeah, Glamdring.
I mean, you see Galadriel would be interesting too, but
that's a different movie.
Yeah, then she's gonna be twined around his leg, right? Staring up at him.
Oh, now we're on Frank Frazetta's version.
Now it's Frank Frazetta's.
He would be swollen that too, so I think it works.
It works. It's just a different fantasy movie. I mean, if you could have each one of these play out, you could have the Galadriel Gandalf fantasy. You could have Gandalf Gamdring with whatever. It's all good. I'm not a very wise up on my Lord of the Rings stuff, but I thought that was kind of funny because I just was like,
Yeah,
oh,
Glamdring. I lost some nerd cred there. Sorry, it's been a while.
that's okay. I did watch the new Lord of the Rings show finally, so I the worst part about it is, I mean, I didn't feel like it was very interesting. Like, I mean, it had moments. It had moments in the show that were really fun. I really don't give a shit about the color blindness crap. Like, that doesn't really bother me. But I just felt the storytelling was a little bit bland. But that's a different night. We could talk about Lord of the Rings shows at another time. But before we do, let's finish up our Dungeons and Dragons movie thing. So Dungeons and Dragons, it comes out March 30th in most theaters. I don't know if I'll see it. I might go see it. I think we should probably go see it just so we could talk about it at least, right? And then either say, yeah, it was the best movie ever, we're fanboys, or no, it wasn't.
I mean, I will see it, but I'm not going to pay for seeing it in a theater. I'm sorry if I'm derelict in my podcast duties, but I'm not gonna pay money to go see it in a theater.
Will you pay money to see it in your home?
I will pay money to see it in my home.
So it's not the money, it's the theater.
I don't like going to the theater either, but
okay,
I can at least watch it with people in my home that I might be able to entertain myself with by making terrible comments about the show. You get kicked out of a theater if you do these things. I'm not saying I know from experience, but I know it happens.
Only if there's other people in the theater at the time and they are offended by it.
I guess that's true.
Not everybody likes riff tracks playing live at their theater showing. That's just how it is. So, okay. Well, I guess it'll definitely be me. I'll try to make time to go see it, and I will then, of course, come gushing with how amazing the movie is, and then you guys will go see it based on my recommendation, and I'll either have got you to go see it, and you guys will hate me, or you guys will question my judgment, or you guys may actually like it. Who knows? There's a whole world of possibilities that could open up for this. Who knows what's going to happen?
You see it. I'll check Metacritic and Rotten Tomatoes and find some choice find some choice thoughts from people paid to make these judgments.
Jeff and I will come with Rotten Tomato quotes.
This is what people thought of this. Well, let's see. I'll confirm or deny whether those are applicable. Because sometimes, and I hate to say this, but some like Hollywood right now it's if you want to get like a good review, sometimes outsourcing that to the crowd isn't the easiest thing to do because crowds can kind of brigade and you can get a bunch of people that get a little crazy. So sometimes you have to just see it for yourself, make your own fucking mind up about it, and decide. I mean, you could film school this thing the entire time, or you could just say if you enjoyed it or not. And I'm kind of in the did you enjoy it or not camp first.
I just don't know if I see enough anti-woke people feeling that the movie is woke and needing to review bomb it.
I hadn't actually heard anything, but you know what? Give it time. There's still a couple weeks.
There's no Hadozi in the movie, so I think it'll be fine.
Okay.
No. Okay. So then I guess with that being said, we've got a definite C, maybe C, and maybe later C. And we'll let you guys know how everything pans out from our review. Next, I think we're going to talk. We're just going to reminisce a little bit because I think we can probably succinctly describe our feelings on both the Paladin and the Druid, and just kind of cover it just really quickly. One of the things that I think it becomes really easy to say, at least one main thought, and this is the main thought that I had, is that I think that D&D is going to suffer from a couple different problems in OneD&D. The first is going to be is that they're not going to make it clear what these classes should do. And so it's going to kind of clash with people's current opinions or the current class fantasy that they've established, either through 5th edition, changes and stuff that they've done, or just how they've established the class with 5th edition. And so I think the Druid is a really good example of they're basically taking what people have established and the few people that play the class they really like about it, and they're trying to simplify it and turn it into something different. And we're not exactly sure what that something different's role is going to be, because it's a full caster that's uses primal magic that can turn into an animal that's kind of meh. And we'll see if that is the final version of it. And then the second thing that they're going to do is they're going to lose my train of thought. What was I thinking about there?
The Paladin nerf, the nerf from the Paladin Smash.
Oh,
button.
That's right. They're going to try to overbalance the game, and so rather than kind of creating unique feeling characters, they're kind of turning this into a spreadsheet where everyone feels like there's a certain amount of balance to the game. And I think that in terms of when you balance the game like that, MMOs struggle with this for everything that they do, and I think that those games that struggle so much on that kind of balance ultimately find themselves feeling rather bland and non-distinct. Those are at least the two comments that I feel that can be made there. Jeff, what did you think about that?
Well, I kind of agree with what you're saying about, kind of reducing everything to meh, but I heard that the playtest version of the Ranger was broken. I heard that it was super overpowered. Am I wrong? Did I get bad information on that? I didn't go back and look at it. I just remember. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
So I can at least give you my recollection of the Ranger. So the Ranger changed in fundamentally good ways. The Bard changed in fundamentally odd ways that didn't make it feel like the same expert class that everyone else did. So the Ranger benefited by the fact that they made it so that Rangers could use abilities in ways that weren't so limiting or focused. Like they used to have the favorite enemy trait or whatever it is, for example. And so they'd have to choose to be like, I'm an orc hunter or something. You know what I'm saying? Like they'd have like kind of this classification that they hunted. Well, now it's more about studying their target and finding their target's weakness, then exploiting that weakness for extra damage and dice and everything like that. So there were tweaks in ways that made Rangers, I wouldn't necessarily call them overpowered, but it definitely boosted the class in a way that people both loved and hated. So, I mean, these watching like the playtest, go both ways on like Reddit and those other kind of places. You see people that have loved and hated all of the changes. I don't think anybody's universally loved any of the classes so far.
Well, thanks for filling in that gap. I got to be honest. I thought that there were small changes to both classes that were positive. But overall, if I had to rate them, I would say the Paladin is a poo emoji and the Druid is 2 or 3 poo emojis. Like if what we heard, that Druid is the least played character in D&D, these changes will make even fewer people play it, and at that point, I don't know why it's a choice. I really hope that I don't think that we're wrong, because I watched a bunch of stuff. I'm interested to hear what Brent has to say, though.
I was just going to kind of sum up with I think one of the things with the Rangers is I think it was a knee-jerk reaction to the fact that Rangers in 5th edition are considered like one of the worst classes, period. They still get played with some very pretty often, I think, but they're not. They were really bad when the game first came out, and then they made some changes. But so I think that's one of the reasons why the Ranger came across as so good this time, is they're just in a really bad place. As far as the Paladin, I think the Paladin nerfs are okay. I mean, being able to use Smite as much as they said in the original book seems kind of hard to as a GM, it would be hard to just account for. It's like, oh, he's gonna bomb this thing, and that. So I think balancing that's okay, at least from a GM perspective. I mean, the Paladins are really, really kind of samey to me. I think it's interesting that they get their horse now, that they get a summon in a dungeon. That's cool. I always love that. And then I think as far as the Druid's concerned, making it one shape that looks like anything you want, I think is bullshit. I hate a leveling like that turns it into just a particle effect where it's like, I'm a deer, but I hit as hard as anything that looks like a tiger or an owlbear or anything else. I just don't like that sort of give them the abilities. If you can change into a monkey, give them better climb. If they're a spider, that sort of stuff. I just think it levels it to the point of being vanilla. So.
You're absolutely correct on the Paladin. The Nova component of it from like an encounter design perspective. If you have a paladin of any that has any number of attacks, greater than one, all of a sudden you get into this situation where you're designing your encounters around the paladin going Nova at the start of your fights, and I don't think that's good game design. And I mean, but mechanically that's what a paladin should do. Like you should, and of course, as the GM, you kind of are left with one option. Either A, you put them in a situation where if they have to choose when to use your Nova, so you basically string enough encounters along that they have to, expend as many, all of their smites before their rest. And I don't know if that's necessarily the game that they'd want to play, because then all of your other party members are designed around one person. But then at the same time, I think that, the other abilities that they got, kind of how their auras work now, the Phantom Steed, I actually think that Paladins, I don't agree. I don't think they're maybe a poop emoji. I think they're balanced a little bit differently now. I just feel that a lot of people that used them as kind of like this, this hammer that had kind of go into fights was a pretty badass, striker with the smiting abilities. I feel like they're going to be a little bit weaker in that regard, and they might have a different role that they play. And that comes back to my first point, is that they really didn't explain what role they want the Paladins to feel like they should play. And so now people that have kind of played them a certain way are going to feel kind of betrayed by the new archetype of Paladin into the OneD&D rule set. But that's just kind of how I felt that kind of folded into everything.
Yeah, I think you guys are making good points, and maybe my reaction is just that Paladin used to be a 9, and now it feels like a 6.5 or a 7, or something like that. But one more comment Brent made me think on the Druids, like with Wild Shape, with the stat blocks, streamlined, much simpler to use, scales horribly, terribly. If you just gave this druid a stick and told it to hit shit with a stick, that scales better with level than the wild shaping does. If they get up to a high enough levels, they're going to do more damage just hitting stuff with a club than wild shaping into a creature. And I think that loses so much role playing and flavor. I don't know, and power. Don't get me wrong. I mean, you have to defeat the enemies to continue playing the game, unless you run away a lot. So, it
definitely changes the expectation of what a druid is in the game sense. The only other comment I wanted to make was I am glad that the paladin will be able to get pony rights to heal people. That's the thing that I'm most happy about, is the healing pony rights. That's what I look forward to someday, is playing a paladin. All right, get on the horse. We're gonna have your healing pony right in the dungeon, where the horse fits in fantastically well in the cave. Yeah.
You just are going to design something for us where the paladin summons its horse, and you're like, "Oh, did I not mention that the tunnel is only 5 feet tall and your horse stands 8 feet? The horse is now permanently injured."
It's a tiny horse now. It's a tiny steed now.
Hey, I'm still okay with the fact that I think you can choose how the horse represents in this. So it's
okay. I
mean, it's like I said, it is interesting, and I hate to say it, it kind of feels like the two abilities that they brought over from MMO, specifically WoW, is they brought over the fact that now druids can cast like this nature bloom and hit things with the mushroom bomb of healing, which is, I don't know, whatever. And that's a very low amount of healing that feels kind of weak. And then now, of course, paladins can summon steeds. And both of those abilities very much reflect how your paladins and druids behave in WoW. So it's just, it's like, it just seems like a needless carryover. And I know that they did a lot with 4th edition to make it a very tactical, virtual tabletop ready game. And I feel like that drop a mushroom, have it hit in a certain area, is going to be very, very nice on the VTTs and very bland in gameplay.
Yeah, that could be.
I have two things. One is a story that I have to share about a past edition where paladins had mounts, and the other is just a comment that you have to be more like a video game to make that video game money. So, you gotta be angling that way. But anyways, the story I was gonna tell is I had a friend who ran a game for some first time people who hadn't really played D&D before. And this is in, I think, 3.5 when you got a mount. You got a celestial mount as your paladin. And he was playing a gnome paladin, and the gnome paladin's mount was a celestial badger, a giant celestial badger. And basically, the paladin could send his celestial badger into the fight and just sit back and eat a sandwich because the badger was so badass. And one of the conversations we had about him GMing the game was, I just don't know how I feel about basically having a mount that's as badass as the rider. And it's one of those things where it's like occasionally like stuff happens and it's like, what do you do about it? Like, what do you do about it? So yeah, the mount thing is always going to be a weird thing for me because sometimes it doesn't get used as a mount. Like if you're summoning, if you have a bear as a mount, maybe you don't ride the bear all the time. You just get off the bear and have it kill things for you. Then it's not a mount anymore. But that stuff happens in these games. Just makes them fun. But yes, it's where part of my GM brain, when people start saying, I have a bear mount or I have this sort of mount, it sort of makes my GM brain smoke a little bit. Anyways,
yeah. And it might be that I just forgot that the Paladins already did receive mounts in previous editions. I may have forgotten that. I just know that in this one they've got a mount, and the mount can use their hoofs and like pat some healing and stuff like that. They get some abilities based on the Fey, Fiend, or Celestial type that it uses. So good callback to remind us that mounts have been a part of the Paladins lore for a little bit longer than just this new playtest.
A problem. Yes.
A problem. That's fair. So I guess just to wrap up, obviously this is all playtest and all this armchair game design that we do and we discuss and everything like that. This may not be at all what happens in the game. They may have one of those aha moments and furiously scribble out changes to all of these classes before OneD&D is released in 20 something 2025 24 something like that, whatever they decide to fully release the game, that could make all of these classes very much gel together in a gameplay fashion that is just so divine that it's like rubbing silk against your body after being freshly washed. Could happen.
No? I have my doubts. Okay, but it'll be a fun game regardless.
Yeah. But the point about it being is that, there's plenty of time for them to still make changes on how this playtest goes. And I'd be surprised if we don't revisit these classes later down the line anyways, just because once they start to get all of the classes introduced in the playtest form, they basically make changes based on feedback received, wink, wink. And then of course, we then see those reintroduced at a later point. So we'll see.
All I'm going to say is they're probably not going to send druids the way that they sent the Ardlings. They'll probably be in the game, so everybody should be happy about it.
Could you imagine an entire class gets put out to pasture? Be like, druids, as soon as you get in wild shape, that's probably the best place for you.
The only druids there are Ardlings. Ardling druids are the only druids there are, but there aren't Ardlings in the game anymore. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
No, I'd feel bad. Like I said, I play a Circle of the Moon Druid, in another game, and I enjoy the damn thing. It's fun. It's a good utility. It allows us to have a party that doesn't have a heavily martial character, but have kind of like martial adjacent characters and not feel like we're going to die the instant somebody draws a sword. So
yeah, an in between character. I mean, that's the nature of the hybrid class. So that's it. Yeah. I hope it fulfills that role, and it just isn't shitty at both or.
Well, yeah,
too good at both. So.
Well, and that's the thing that always bothers me is when you somehow have a hybrid class outperforming a main class in said same thing. I'm a warrior. What can I do? I'm out DPS'd by every other class that can hold a weapon. How exciting is this class?
I definitely can't smite bomb like the paladin can. So yeah, I get that. So anyway,
I can throw my body in front of an attack. That sounds fun. Okay, so now we'll move on to the other part of our show, which is that we are going to talk a little bit about the Night Sow. This is a This is like a published mystery from Free League, and it's part of a book called A Wicked Secret and Other Mysteries. So these are mysteries that they put together so you can experience more of the game of Vaesen. And from our perspective, we actually played two of them. We played the Silver of the Sea, and then we played the Night Sow. Of course, over the course of both of these adventures, I learned a lot about running mysteries and a lot about my gaming group and how they play mysteries, which I think is a hugely important lesson to learn. So first and foremost, I did want to say a quick shout out to Nils Hintz. I think I'm saying that correctly. Is that he's the one who wrote the Night Sow, and I really thought it was a good mystery in just how it was presented and everything like that. Even though me as a game master running it probably had my own missteps in how I presented it and everything along those lines. One of those could have been how I accidentally set the priest up for failure. But we won't talk about that. But the overview of the Night Sow is that the Night Sow is, and spoilers for this, just so in case you are playing this or going to be playing this, the Night Sow is basically a hell pig is terrorizing a small Scandinavian village on the sea. And the reason why it's terrorizing this small Scandinavian village is because there is a hotel that was opened by a lady, and it allowed for mixed bathing in the ocean during those summer touristy months. You know, Vaesen being set in the 19th century, this is obviously of the devil, and so the local kind of more conservative townsfolk have been trying their best to shut this hotel down. And needless to say, the Lightkeeper has found a way to do so, and the Hell Pig is part of that plan. So that's kind of what the summary of the story.
I think you forgot to add that it is fully clothed bathing in the ocean.
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is the 19th century. I mean, they're like going with like when they say bathing suits, it's like top to bottom, but it's with both sexes. So obviously that's some pretty racy dipping.
Obviously degenerates. Obviously.
Let's not downplay the scandalousness of this, Jeff, please.
So basically the premise is that everybody, and the one thing I like about Vaesen Mysteries is that they kind of get you going in the direction of the mystery very quickly. And all Vaesen Mysteries, or most Vaesen Mysteries, start out with like an invitation of sort that tells you, hey, this is what the problem is, and this is where you guys need to go. And so much like the Scooby-Doo crew, you guys get in your mystery machine, you go off to a faraway place or nearby, it doesn't really matter, and you then can start investigating said mystery. So in this case, they received a message from Olga, who is a former member of the society, and the society being the Vaesen world's group of people that are kind of those ancient historians of all things esoteric and magical. And they receive a request to help. They don't know what's happening. They're stuck in a hotel, and then the PCs went off to the city. So this is, and it's funny because when they get to this new town, well, this isn't funny. They get to this new town. They actually find that there's a dead body in the snow, and I thought they did a really good job, kind of like ascertaining the situation and everything like that right there. But this is where I unfortunately got stuck a little bit. You guys surprised me because the hotel is actually the locus of the story, the Seaside Hotel. And where did these guys stay the entire time we were playing the game? Do you guys want to mention this to everybody?
We stayed at the town inn.
Yeah, you stayed at the town inn. So all of the NPCs and everything like that you're supposed to be interacting with to start solving this mystery are in a different fucking place.
And in fairness, one of us was playing, not Brent or I, not that matters, was playing a priest, and when he found out that they were practicing witchcraft, he essentially refused to stay in the location that we were supposed to be in. And I'm not, this is not a blame thing. It kind of just happened naturally because we all went, yeah, well, that makes sense. If you're not going to stay there, we're not going to send you back to the inn. We can travel back and forth. It's not that far. But no, it definitely, I think as players, you said that it took you a little bit to get better to run the mysteries, right? To game master those. But as players, I think that we're still learning how to do this. I would urge anybody, and I've never played Vaesen before this. I think it's a pretty nifty system. I really like it, but I think you have to get a couple of mysteries, maybe even as many as 3 or 4 under your belt before you start feeling comfortable with it, because you're just going to do the stupidest things. And I'm as guilty as our character that had us staying somewhere else. My character for some reason decided that the priest was not on the up and up, and confronted the priest and added needless time because my character is going through a PTSD episode from being a war correspondent. And I'm trying to play my character and I'm leading us astray. So Brent, what do you think?
I think there is no way you could have gotten us to stay at the other hotel at that point. I think I don't think any amount of mysteries that we've done would have prevented us from being like, well, our stuff is here and our party member has enough money to pay for rooms here. Yeah, we're just going to stay here. And then investigate from here. Like, I think that's just kind of the nature of the thing that happened. Like, I mean, if you remember right, like, we didn't even want to tell her friends that she was dead originally. We originally were like, yeah, we sleep.
We did, but we wanted it to be in the morning.
And then subtly you said, well, there's people expecting her back. You may want to tell them. And it was like, oh, yeah, probably. We should probably, just in case, there's a mad murderer running around at night, we probably don't want these other 3 ladies going out into the night and getting ripped apart. So then we went out there, but then, yeah, we did not stay at the locus of your mystery.
Well, and it's actually really interesting because it brings up part of the improv nature of being the game master, and this is, kind of reacting to your players a little bit and understanding that, you have to sometimes be a little bit light on your feet, because if I would have somehow, I could have somehow forced you guys to stay in that other inn, I could have contrived something that it may not have made sense or anything like that, but it basically was the DM, nudge and a wink saying, like, stay at the motherfucking hotel, you assholes. There could have been some contrivance there that could have made that happen, but I feel like as a GM, it's better to improvise and account for the players' actions and have those players' actions actually be meaningful. Now, the thing about it being, though, is that what was interesting in my mind is that, as I'm trying to think on my feet here, I'm like, okay, well, what are the possible consequences, both positive and negative, of them staying at this hotel, or staying not at the hotel, but at the inn? Well, the negative consequences are now that I have to find a bunch of other ways to drop these pieces of information, because a lot of the information was actually in the hotel. So, like, where is this rooting cave? Where is this? How do they learn about, Olga's past as an actual witch? How do we get some information that Lisa Svensson has to share about, like, Katarina, the proprietress who's gone missing for 10 days? Like, how do you do that? And then of course you find ways to subtly shift where that information is located. And it was a little bit hectic. And I think I made some mistakes on how that was parsed. And I think I noticed it, and then I had to reintroduce some of that information at different times. And I think it left out some really good opportunities for you guys to see how the conflict between the various people could have led you down different paths as to who could have these motives to be to have maybe murdered the proprietress and all those kind of things, and understand the Vaesen in question. But that's because I was literally trying to figure out and rearrange all the information in my head on the fly, so that I could get you guys all the information you needed. So that's a learning experience, but I think it's a really good skill to kind of build, and you only build it by experiencing it, in my opinion. Like, you kind of have to go through it to get it. Like, you don't see those people on improv stages. They don't just go up there one day and be like, I'm going to be an improv comedian, and then they're just perfect at it, right? They usually practice, and they have to kind of get quick on their feet and all those things. So that was a good opportunity for me, because that taught me a lot about, you guys.
Yeah, that's what they always say, like, you don't say no, right? Like, you always want to say yes and I think that was really good, allowing us to stay in the hotel that we wanted. I think there's things that you could have done to probably, like you said, guide us back to the hotel. And I think, getting us to go out and investigate and ask questions and stuff was a good way to get us the information. Was one question I have for you, is there actual events that happened in the hotel that like were clues, or was it just us talking to the people? Because I think we got around to that pretty clearly.
Well, so there's actually 2 timers that go through the game, right? And what they mean by timers in this case, and for those of you that may have not played a mystery, is that mysteries are best when there's some sort of time-bound component to it. And so in this case, there are 2 timers. One timer is the Glossin, which is the hell pig that's kind of the Vaesen of the story. And that hell pig is basically it's going to be chewing its way through, literally, by goring and, like killing people through this entire mystery. The people with the sight. So its first people that it tries to kill are going to be the witches, because those are the people that it knows of. Those are the people it's been kind of commanded to kill by the Lightkeeper. And that is going to mean that, the Glossin, and the cool part about the Glossin is that even though Vaesen aren't really good to fight physically, and the game is kind of designed around you not getting into physical altercations with Vaesen, because they're mystical, magical beings kind of on a level that you don't comprehend, and you can't just like go and stab one kind of thing. Well, it gets more powerful every person with the sight that it eats. so that remember that mystery about the witches stealing each other's power? That's the Glossin getting more and more powerful with each person with the sight that it devours. So after it had finished with the coven, it was going to eventually go after the players, and that was to be your real trigger to like get your shit moving, because once it gets through the witches, now it's going to start trying to pick off players, and obviously you couldn't confront it and have any chance of victory because it was a very powerful creature to begin with, and then it would just be simply more powerful after an appetizer of 4 witches kind of thing. But there were events that took place in the hotel, and that was just, and I kind of contrived those in a way that you still experience them. So like, for example, the one that tries to walk out of the hotel to go see what's happening outside, the one that left the hotel to go seek absolution from the priest that did get killed. You know what I'm saying? I still snuck those in when you guys went there, but it felt like I was kind of shoehorning them. I'm like, oh, they're going back to the hotel, better get this one in.
No, actually, you put those in really well. That's one of the reasons that I always say, if we're not offering GM advice, but GM advice that I always give is like, have a plan, but be ready to ad lib and vary the plan. Have an outline and be ready to change things around, because your players will do things that you just didn't account for. So I think you did very well shoehorning that stuff in. Because that was because I thought maybe you made those up on the fly and they weren't part of they weren't part of the original text. So that's really good. One question, and then I'll turn it over to Jeff. The one question I had for you is, one of the things that I've read about mysteries and doing a little bit of research as you've been running mysteries is I don't feel like our characters are necessarily aware of the timeline with the pig. Is there any of the Vaesen's games that really kind of make the players aware of the clock that's ticking? Because that's one thing that in a lot of mysteries that I've noticed that they suggest is make the players aware that this is going to happen. Like you have 12 hours to solve this case, or they're going to come and just take the body away, or the FBI is going to show up and take jurisdiction or stuff like that.
Well, and I guess from my perspective, that hasn't been presented in the way that these mysteries are done. They're basically keep it on track prompts so far, at least in the pre-generated mysteries. Now, I think in many ways, I think both are correct. Like, having you have to catch this murderer within 48 hours, because after 48 hours, the trail goes cold, is, I think, a fine deadline to make sure that your mystery has. But I also like these kind of I'm going to call these like these gentle nudges or prods by the game to make sure that you gain a sense of urgency, that, because you're kind of, and especially in the case of the Vaesen, it's a little bit different in so much as that I mean, if you don't have a timeline, I mean, how long could you spend investigating an immortal spiritual creature, right? You could spend forever. But if that creature is now killing members of the village, and then once it's done with them, you're next. I mean, all of a sudden you have a lot more motivation to solve that mystery. Now, admittedly, it would have been nice if you'd have solved it before the entire village was murdered, and now you guys are, the most likely suspects. But there is, I think that's just a different type of clock, and I think it's a little bit less direct, but it's still very, very helpful.
Yeah, I was just curious. Go ahead, Jeff. I think you had a question.
Yeah, I think you guys both touched on it. I'm going to be honest. In this second one, I felt more urgency. Maybe not throughout the whole thing, and I think that we as a group kind of, at least I didn't fully understand the clue about the Glosson getting stronger with each person with this. Like, we knew it got stronger with each person with the sight, but that didn't add urgency to me, and maybe that was just me misunderstanding it. But as a group, it felt like we all heard it and went, well, I guess we better find it, kind of like, but I don't know that it imparted the urgency that we needed, because, whether it's time, time bound, like Brent talked about, to go back to something like Agatha Christie, right? Like Murder on the Orient Express. The train's eventually getting to a place where the cops are going to take over the train and take over the investigation. And that's your time bound component. And literally every second you're getting closer to it. I thought this one, the urgency, we felt more, but I still feel like as players, we weren't quite picking up on some of the stuff. And it's not a GM criticism. I think it's just some of how we're processing information as a group criticism for how we're playing. Like, we're learning this. We had fun. We had a ton of fun, but
the game was.
I think it could have been better.
I do think Jeff is right. My character's decision that, like, we need to solve this ramped up when he found out that they were going to be the next victims. Like, and I don't think he understood that until they had the encounter with the Glosson, where my character, Stabby McStabby Pants, and the hunter that we were with went out and encountered the pig and realized that it was going to attack us just as much as it was going to attack one of the witches. I think that was when it really, this thing isn't going to stop at, like, this. It was then that my character realized this isn't targeted. Like, the assumption I had up until that point, and my character kind of had, was it's only targeting people that are these specific people. Like, it's for some reason it wants the witches. And it really ramped up for my character when he's like, it's not going to stop. It's going to come after us. And that was when it really hit the timer of, we need to stop it so we don't die too. So, but I think that's, and I think, but yeah, no, the game itself was excellent. Like, it was very good.
Yeah, and so I mean, like I said, I want to give a lot of credit, and honestly, I think I embellished a little bit on the fact that the pig was going to kill all you guys, but I mean, that's just me. I wanted you guys to feel the wrath of the pig, but I think that the interesting part about it is I think that and that the way you guys are framed it here, this is always an interesting conversation to have, because the one thing that GMs and players very rarely do is they rarely have heart-to-heart talks about how things are going, and they give feedback, either good or bad, about how the game is. And this is what's interesting about this weekly kind of discussion. If we do any kind of like reminiscence about a previous game, is it gives me interesting introspective as to how you guys perceive the game, but it also gives me feedback as to what I can do differently. Because the one thing that I think the reason why people view these as countdowns is because they would perceive the witches' lives as being somewhat valuable, and they would hate for more witches to die. And that doesn't seem like it was necessarily part of your guys's, you know what I'm saying? Like, based on how you guys are talking, at least, it doesn't seem like that was your, like, you guys didn't have that same perspective. So for you, it's like, well, they're witches. They're obviously diabolists that, are sleeping with, the almighty Baphomet. So they can go die. So, like, I think in my mind, there's a little bit of a disconnect, because most, I think, investigators would go, oh my God, we have to, save these witches. They may not be your most upstanding citizens, but they're still people getting hunted down by this pig. So,
well, in fairness, the society member died before we even got there, and then one of the three witches got killed. So, on the whole, I think that we kept two of the three witches alive. So, in essence, we were sort of quick. But we definitely as a party had a component like, well, they were trying, black magic and trying to summon a demon, and if they died, I think that just kind of goes with the territory.
So, but that's my point. That's I think that disconnect, because that countdown doesn't.
It was a
work
disconnect.
For you then. Yeah,
it was. I agree.
My character did a little. Like, that's why he stopped the lady from walking outside. Like, there's this part where she falls into a trance and she starts going outside, and that's why my character stopped her, is because, like, he did care about their lives, but I think my character personally didn't care about the witches as much as they did the girl. I can't even remember her name, unfortunately. The girl running the inn in lieu of the original owner. Like, his realization that this might murder more people than just the witches kind of extended to her, because she seemed like and empathy for hopefully finding the original inn owner, because they seemed like completely innocent in this case. And so my character, like, those two characters motivated my character, as well as just realizing that it's probably not going to stop with just when I say it's not just going to stop with the witches, I do mean, like, where next, like that. I do mean that, but it also means, like, it's not going to stop killing anyone. So my character was a little bit more empathetic towards the townsfolk, especially like the person taking care of the inn at the time. So I think you did a good job with that. But the witches, unfortunately, when you start saying things like, we tried to talk to Lucifer, you sort of kind of go, well, you may kind of deserve what's going on, maybe a little bit, kind of, because this deal probably was going to work out for you in the first place. I'm sorry there's a murder pig, but you probably shouldn't, do stuff like that. But I think so those are hard characters to be sympathetic with, but
yeah. Well, and I think that the tough part is that, seeing it now, like, I realized that I didn't create them as having a lot of empathy. I don't think they're written in a way that generates a lot of empathy, because obviously they're Satanists and they're trying to summon the devil to make their lives easier by giving them life, money, all these other things. And it's not really an empathetic character to begin with. So, I think there's probably a way I could have done it, but I think that's where the disconnect on the countdown is that becomes less of a countdown for you, because, like, until it hits the catastrophe part of the countdown, like, you're like, I mean, they kind of summoned this pig, so it's oh, sucks to be you. I get it. Right. But yeah, and so the interesting part is that I think we did kind of go through this, and I think when we got to more of the climax and we started introducing Magnus as kind of the main conflict between you guys and him, that I thought that was really fun. And this is another GM tip that you really should do is you should make sure that you know your characters, like, their skills and abilities, and the players can too, because especially with us, I think we need to have a series on, like, 2-hour games, because we only play maybe 2 hours each week. And I think that is becoming more common these days, especially when you're, like, an adulting. And I don't want to diminish anybody's gaming experience, but when I was young, like, I'm talking like in high school and stuff like that, I would literally go get a key to a conference room at the library at like 3 on a Saturday, and we would be there past midnight. So we would do like 8+ hours of gaming easy. We would order pizza, we'd have drinks, we'd obviously clean up our conference room and everything like that. But we did everything from Dungeons and Dragons to live action role playing to, like, anything that we wanted to do during that time. And nowadays, if you guys wanted to have a 4-hour session, I'd have to get out my Google Calendar. I'd have to be like, oh God, I got to arrange this with my wife. Like, and I know that by the end of especially during a weekday, like, try to have a 4-hour gaming session on a Wednesday night. Ugh.
Yeah, exactly. It was the same way for me when I was younger. I would go over, I'd walk to my, buddy's house at like 9 a.m, and we would play until like 6 p.m. And that stuff. So, right, in gaming on the time budget that you're on now as an adult, it's definitely different. So it's definitely something we
Yeah.
should consider giving
Well,
advice for in the future.
Well, and it's interesting because I mean, unfortunately, with those smaller segments, I think it's easier to forget components of your character. And so I do think that as a DM, even if you minimally prepare, you should always look over your players' character sheets, just to know what they can do and everything like that. And I think that could be, it helps prompt them too, because they want to play their characters to the best of their ability, but sometimes they forget. Like, hell, I'm a player and I've forgotten shit that I can do. They're like, "Hey, Mike, can't you do this?" I'm like, "Can I?"
Yeah,
So-
reminding characters of their abilities. I think you did really well in this adventure as well. I think that was really good.
Well, and Jeff, so Jeff is a character that has the ability to really, really like. Jeff, do you want to explain what your ability is? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, it's once a session, my character can kind of sit down and start meditating and kind of commune with the spirits that are around. And I can ask a general question and I get a vague answer. Like depending on my role, right? The more successes, the less vague. But even with several successes, the answers are still a little vague, but it was enough to point us in the right direction. It's kind of a cool concept. It doesn't, take a long time. You can only use it once a session, but it does add a little flavor to the character. And in my case, I don't, because I was a war correspondent and used to sketching stuff, we decided that my character really gets visual pictures rather than, hauntingly writing down, random words in a journal, that I sort of black out and sketch these pictures that are a little hard to decipher. But I thought I think it adds a lot of flavor. It's kind of a cool little ability.
And I think the nice thing about it is that, it can really help, it helps with the mystery, to kind of be using these things, because first of all, I enjoy that one. I was really waiting for you to use that at some point, because I was like, I have so many different ways in which this can come based on when you say it. And I was like, okay, perfect. I can use it this way and kind of go into these details. And it was, I like I said, I enjoy it because it's just kind of like I can have this visualization that I can give you guys and be like, okay, now is that picture worth 1,000 words? Who knows?
Well, I think one of the important things in a mystery game is having somebody have an ability like that, because what that allows you to do is, as the GM, reach into the world and make a hint that's very a little bit more obvious to move the characters in the right direction. I think that was the hint that really cemented for us going to the lighthouse, and that's where we found like the proof. Because the thing is like, we had talked about going to the lighthouse, but then it was like, it's hard. Really, it's starting to sound like our characters are just really lazy. Yeah, we're not going to move our stuff. Yeah, we're not going to go hike all the way out to the lighthouse. Jesus, this is hard. But anyways, the thing is, and we were just going to talk to Magnus in town, but I think that was really what prompted us to go to the lighthouse and come up with a plan of like splitting the party, having them distract him while we go out and we search the lighthouse. Was, I think, part of that was talking to the priest and having that picture and being able to say, hey, does this look familiar? Oh yeah, that looks kind of like Magnus's lighthouse. Like, that was the first solid clue. Like, I think that was really the clue that tipped us over the edge and of this is probably what we need to do to solve this. And I think those abilities and reminding people that they have those are important, because those are the ones that are going to give you as our game master and narrator the ability to like reach into the scene and be like, listen, dummy, you're missing this. Pay attention to this piece of thing. And I think that's necessary, especially in a mystery where the players just might miss important things or never catch on. So I think that's having an ability where you can reach into the scene is, I think, good. And I think that was an excellent use of that sort of ability in this case.
And I think that, and the good news is that in this case, so the first mystery we ran, we really didn't have the quote unquote satisfying mystery solved with the Vaesen, but I really think that we actually did a good job. You guys actually solved the mystery. All the pieces made sense. Who was doing what? You guys did your thing. So I think that one was much more satisfying one to end with, because what was it? what was it with those MMA fighters you used to say, Brent? You don't want to you don't want to retire on a win kind of thing, like.
Right. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I hate to retire on a win here, but I feel like we actually, we had a satisfying end. I think the next mystery that we run for Vaesen is actually going to be one that I write myself. So I'm kind of excited to do that, and I'm working on it right now. I got a couple ideas. So,
that's exciting. I hope that you find a way to kind of maintain the tone. Like, this isn't a super happy setting. These aren't, like, when we solve the mystery, it feels good that we solved it, but like there were horrific consequences. There was bad stuff that happened. There was some good stuff, but there was also bad stuff. It's not like one of those settings where it's like, yay, and they, the town holds a parade in your honor and showers you with gifts. It's like, some of us kind of wish that you had never come here, and we would like you to leave now. And I'm kind of getting into that.
Well, I think one of the things that's good about both Vaesen games is, regardless of whether or not we solve the mystery, and I feel like we did really have a strong solve in the second game, whereas we had a weak solve in the first game. I think the one thing that was really good about both games, and leaning towards the first one, is you still gave the players still had a sense of accomplishment at the end of the first game. Like, we saved the girl, and really, honestly, that was in that particular adventure. At least me and my character feel like that was enough. Like, in the second game, we also kind of had that good ending where we rescued the girl that had been turned into the murder pig, which was also a pretty good thing. She probably was the most innocent of all the people in the scenario, really. At least as far as we know, which is fine. Other than her scandalous bathing together thing, which, whatever. My character's not a religious man, so it's okay. But so that's kind of the thing, is I think the end on the high note, even if you didn't solve the mystery, was kind of nice in the first one, but it was pretty satisfying to end having solved the mystery this time. So yeah, I think that was cool.
Didn't when we ended the first one, like we saved the girl, but didn't we condemn the region to economic poverty for generations? Spoiler alert, sorry. You can cut that, Mike, if you need to.
No, that's fine. No, that doesn't matter. We beat the evil people. We saved the girl. That's all that matters.
Yeah, the funny part about it is that I'm not going to say anything that would give away any hints, but it was interesting how that ended. And I think there's a little piece of me up here that's still reminiscing about how I might be able to use that in the future. So, good luck.
No, they're all dead. They're all dead.
Yeah, they've all starved by now, Mike. We're pretty sure. Without the herring trade, they're...
Without the silver of the sea.
We will see. That's all I can say. So I guess what we can say is that ultimately mystery games are a lot of fun, but they do take a lot more work. And I think that I would say poo-poo to anybody that says that mystery games are not something that you can run. Because, there's a lot of people that basically, kind of, they must be some sort of trauma that they had. They had a mystery game that turned out really poorly or ended really bad and all that kind of stuff. I do have to say that there's potential for that in every one of these games that we've run, but I do think that you can have a really good time. And I've enjoyed Vaesen to hell. I loved this game so far, and I like the system. I think it's definitely got some flaws that, for me, the system itself doesn't itch. It doesn't scratch a couple of the itches that I really like. Like, for example, satisfying combat feels like combat is just like I just accidentally killed you. Whoops. Those dice, those tricksy dice. And then, of course, I think the progression feels a little bit like flat in terms of like how your character, it gets better in certain ways, but it really doesn't feel like you have a good character progression thing like you do in some of the other more epic fantasy games. And so those two scratches, I don't think I'm gonna get. Those two itches. Those two itches I'm not necessarily going to scratch with Vaesen, but I really like the concept of the world. I think mystery games are becoming a lot of fun, and that even though it's not my forte, I'm really enjoying the idea of getting better at them. So,
I think mystery games are a good way to break up other games. I still don't know if I personally want to run one, but I do think they are a good way to break up your murder hobo fest.
Well, there are so many good games out there, and some average ones, and maybe some that aren't as great. But there's nothing wrong with sticking to one system, I guess. But man, it gets kind of boring because after a while, it's like I keep playing slight variations of the same two characters, and maybe that's my problem, and I'm not bringing enough to the table. But getting to play some of these other games that are a little more role playing heavy, that are a little less dice heavy, that explore things in a different way in a different world, I think it kind of refreshes you and helps you bring more to the next game that you run in your favorite system. And so I would encourage people to try some new things. It's an investment. It's an investment in time and money. I get that, and we all have limited amounts of both. But if you can, try to get your group to agree on something and give something a try. There's a lot of good stuff out there to support. Yep.
And we hope that if you've listened to this point, that we can help guide you through some of those selections. So, with that being said, next week we are going to embark on a little bit of a Pathfinder stint, a little bit overdue, but I have a feeling that these guys have given me an extra week to make the adventure extra dangerous. Unfortunately, the encounter builder has levels, and because we waited a week, I've just bumped all the levels up one. So now it goes from weak to moderate to severe to extreme. I've just put everything at the severe, extreme plus end of the spectrum.
I would expect no less.
Yeah, we knew we were going to die. We made disposable characters.
Well, and so I think it'll be interesting because it gives us a chance to really test out the Pathfinder rules, because the one thing I will say is that, I just don't apparently have the concentration to read Pathfinder, like the rules, like straight front to back. I kind of have to glance through them. And I think and I've done that. I've just kind of looked through them, because like reading 40 straight pages of like, if A is greater than B and round proceeds to C, then, oh God, it makes me really Jones for those minimalist / elegant style games where it's just like, there's a game called 2400 that I was looking at that was like 3 pages. Like, okay, let's do this.
It's just like, yeah, it's like Troika and some of those other games that I've talked to you about where it's like, it's 3 stats, 2 dice.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's pretty easy. You just, like I said, the key to all narrative games is really know when you want people to fail, because if you make them roll when it's not a good time, you could really hinder your ability to tell a good story. But I don't know. I'm reviewing the rules. Hopefully I'll have some sort of sense of them. I'm not really a rules guy all the time either, but and I did not make a disposable character. I love my character, and I don't want him to die, but I expect that he probably will, because that's what happens to all the characters that I grow to like.
So I will say that, so we're going to be very small at first in terms of Pathfinder, and then depending on how the group wants to do, we may stick with Pathfinder for a few moments, and then we might try something else. Alien is still on the menu. Here's some news. My wife actually wants me to run her through a game, so I'm actually going to do a duet with her, and I have to find the system, and I think I've actually settled on the system. I think it's Risus, Risus. It's a very rules light, anything kind of system that you could use, and we're going to do a little bit of 1930s Indiana Jones adventure-esque with a little bit of librarian stuff mixed in. So I think that'll be good. He's going to be searching for the heart of Ishtar. This will be all kinds of fun with Babylonian stuff. Gonna dust off my... What's that?
I have looked at Risus. I have looked at Risus before. Risus is the one where the art's all stick figures. Is that correct?
Yeah. It's like it's a very easy system, and I felt like instead of really jumping to something really big under, because like Into the Odd could be a good one for it, because it's actually kind of that it kind of has a lot of the same things, but it's a lot of rules still for a person who's never touched an RPG.
No, I think that's a good choice.
Yeah, Rice should be able to get at least the story told, and I think if she does this right, then it could be a lot of fun, and maybe we'll do other duets down the road. So you never know; there might be a separate segment.
Yeah, and like I said, their art style is befitting a really simple game, so I think that's kind of cool. So yeah, no, I think that's a good choice.
And Jeff, if you want, I'll write up the adventure that I'm going to do for Kelly, and if you want to see what my bare bones adventure looks like, you can see if Jessica wants to run something similar. Is she into that kind of style, the Indiana Jones-esque, librarians-esque kind of game, or no?
I think she could be. We're certainly trying stuff. We have a friend here in town that may teach us the Root role-playing game.
That's nice.
And so she's in a mood to learn, and so we'll try a bunch of stuff and see what we like and see what we don't. Because everybody's got to try and find their legs.
Yeah, and the nice thing about learning something like Root is that I believe that's powered by the Apocalypse. So if she happens to like that style of gameplay, it really opens you up to a large number of games that are, because I mean the PBTA like games, there's a lot of them, and they're all very interesting. One of my favorite art from a game right now is actually from a PBTA game. It's called Bluebeard's Bride. It's so good. I love that art. So yeah, I'm excited. You should tell us how it goes.
I will. Yeah, no, I'm happy to do regular updates when we actually play some of this stuff.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go off and write an adventure and learn the system. So, Brent, do you want to get us signed out?
As always, thank you for joining us, and thank you for spending time with us. And as always, roll well and roll wise.